You don't need to overhaul your entire life. In fact, that's exactly why most people fail when they try to make a change. They set goals that are too big, too scattered, and too overwhelming. What actually creates long-lasting transformation is identifying one keystone habit, one simple behavior that triggers a chain reaction across every other part of your life. If you can do that, if you can find the one habit that makes everything else easier or even unnecessary, your life begins to change in ways you never imagined. Let me tell you why this works. The brain doesn't change all at once. It changes through repetition, through consistency, and through emotional reinforcement. That means when you focus your energy on mastering just one habit, you're not just building discipline in that area, you're creating neural patterns that increase your overall capacity for change. Your brain starts saying, "Oh, we're the kind of person who follows through, who finishes things, who keeps promises." That one small shift redefines your self-image, and identity, not willpower, is what sustains transformation. For some people, that keystone habit is waking up early. For others, it might be doing a 10-minute cold shower every morning, or even something as simple as writing in a journal. The habit itself is less important than what it does. It sets a foundation for momentum. Because when you wake up and start the day with intention, not by accident, not by chaos, but with a clear action, you put yourself in a position of control. You anchor your nervous system. You take charge of the neurochemicals that drive your mood and motivation for the next 12 to 16 hours. Here's the real magic. This one habit creates what I call the upward spiral. Suddenly, you're a little more energized, so you decide to eat a better breakfast. That meal gives you stable glucose, which sharpens your focus. With better focus, you knock out your work in less time. That win gives you a dopamine reward not from distraction, but from achievement. And now that you feel good, you're more likely to train, more likely to sleep better, and more likely to repeat the cycle the next day. All from one decision, but here's the problem. Most people never stick with it long enough to see that compounding effect. They try a new habit for 5 days, maybe 10, and when they don't feel radically different, they quit. You can't plant a seed and expect fruit overnight. You have to water it, protect it, stay consistent. That's why this isn't about doing something once or twice, it's about committing to it for 90 straight days. That's the threshold where change becomes identity, where the brain starts saying, "This isn't what we do, this is who we are." And the science backs this up. When you repeat a habit over a multi-week period, especially when it's tied to purpose and progress, you increase myelination in the relevant neural circuits, meaning those pathways become faster, more automatic. You also trigger more stable dopamine release because the brain learns to associate the action with reward, not just the outcome. In other words, the habit stops being a task and becomes part of your nervous system's natural rhythm. That's when things really start to shift. So ask yourself right now, what's one thing you can do every day that would ripple into every other area of your life? It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be consistent. Maybe it's that 6 a.m. wake up with 5 minutes of silence. Maybe it's the daily walk after lunch. Maybe it's simply deciding not to hit snooze, no matter what. Start there, not with 10 habits, not with a complete life overhaul. Just one. Do it for 90 days. Let it rewire your brain. Let it rebuild your confidence. Let it be the thing that reminds you you are in control. Because once you prove that to yourself, even just once, everything changes. The first 90 minutes of your day are not just minutes. They're momentum, they're leverage. They either push your entire system into alignment or throw it into chaos. Most people don't realize that the way they start their morning sends a signal to every part of the body, from their hormonal system to their emotional regulation to their ability to focus. And once that signal is set, it's hard to change midstream. That's why this window is so critical. If you can own your morning, you can shape your entire day. And if you can do that consistently for 90 days, you can rewire the way you experience your entire life. One of the most powerful things you can do is anchor your morning with purpose, not by scrolling, not by reacting to notifications, not by being pulled into someone else's priorities. You start with intention. Because what you allow into your mind and body in that first hour sets your mental filters for the next 16. That's not motivational fluff, that's neurobiology. The early morning is when your cortisol rhythm peaks, which means your body is primed for alertness, focus, and action. But if you hijack that state with distraction like checking your phone or jumping straight into stress, you burn through your mental energy before you've even truly begun. So instead, what do? You build a simple, repeatable protocol that activates your system in the right direction. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. Start with natural light. Step outside within 30 to 60 minutes of waking, even if it's cloudy. Let the light hit your eyes, no sunglasses, no glass in between. That sends a direct signal to your circadian clock to start the metabolic and cognitive engines of the day. You're telling your brain, it's time to be awake, alert, engaged. Next move, it doesn't have to be a full workout. Even just a walk or a few minutes of dynamic movement, jumping jacks, push-ups, stretching, it's enough to shift your physiology. Physical movement signals your body to release dopamine and epinephrine in controlled doses, sharpening focus and motivation. It primes the brain for learning, decision making, and mental resilience. And it has a carryover effect. Your mind becomes more willing to take on challenges because it's already in motion. Then hydrate. The brain is made up of about 75% water. After a night of sleep, you're naturally dehydrated, and that dehydration impacts cognition, energy, and even emotional control. Something as simple as drinking a full glass of water with a pinch of salt and a squeeze of lemon can do more for your clarity than a double espresso. You're restoring the balance your brain needs to function at its peak, and finally, get clear on your direction. Even 1 minute of reflection, goal setting, or intention writing has a measurable impact on your executive function. You're activating your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision making, and impulse control. What does that mean? It means you're giving yourself a compass. You're saying, this is what matters today. This is what I will move toward. And the rest of the day starts bending around that clarity. When you repeat this pattern consistently, something profound starts to happen. You begin to build trust with yourself. You start to believe, not just hope, that you're capable of control. That you're not at the mercy of distraction or emotion or circumstances. You're not just reacting to life, you're designing it. And when you do this for 90 days straight, it moves from being a practice to becoming your new default. It's not something you do, it becomes who you are. This is how you shift from being pulled by life to leading it, and it all starts with how you begin your day. Short-term discomfort is the price of long-term greatness. That's not just a mindset, that's a neurological principle. Every time you delay gratification, every time you resist the easy option in favor of the meaningful one, you train your brain to become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of real change. But this isn't about pushing through life with gritted teeth. It's about understanding how the brain rewards effort over ease and using that to your advantage. Because here's the truth, growth doesn't come from what feels good now, it comes from what serves you later. When you consistently choose delayed gratification, what you're really doing is strengthening the neural circuits of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that governs decision making, impulse control, and future thinking. That's the command center for long-term success. But here's the catch. It doesn't get stronger by reading books or listening to advice. It gets stronger through action, through resistance, through choosing to sit with the craving instead of feeding it. Through saying no when every part of you wants to say yes. Let's take a simple example, scrolling. You feel bored or stressed, so you grab your phone. It gives you a hit of dopamine, quick, easy, and meaningless. But over time, those hits weaken your baseline dopamine. You need more stimulation to feel the same level of satisfaction. That's why focus drops, energy drops, and motivation drops. But when you replace that habit with a deliberate pause, even just 5 minutes of deep breathing or walking away from the impulse, you give your brain the chance to reset. And more importantly, you start rewarding effort over escape. This principle applies everywhere in training, nutrition, work, even relationships. Skip the workout and relax, easy reward, but show up, sweat through the discomfort, and finish. That's delayed gratification. And it teaches your brain that satisfaction is earned, not handed out. The result, you get a more powerful dopamine response not from shortcuts, but from showing up when it counts. That's how motivation becomes sustainable. Not from chasing highs, but from trusting that the effort is the reward. What happens over 90 days is remarkable. Every time you delay gratification, choosing the long term over the short term, you reinforce that identity. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who gives in, but as someone who holds the line. That shift in identity is what truly changes a person, and over time, the things that once felt hard become normal. Not because the challenge disappeared, but because you became stronger. This isn't about deprivation, it's about alignment. When your actions are aligned with your goals, even if they're hard in the moment, your brain begins to light up differently. You start to enjoy the process. You build momentum from discipline, not dopamine spikes, and that's the difference between chasing pleasure and building a life you're proud of. So if you want your life to change, start with this. Practice discomfort every day. Not all day, just one decision at a time. Say no to the easy path and yes to the one that demands more from you, because that's where the growth lies. Dopamine is one of the most misunderstood forces driving human behavior. Most people think dopamine equals pleasure, but that's not really true. Dopamine is about pursuit. It's the chemical that fuels motivation, desire, and effort. And here's where it gets tricky when you flood your system with cheap dopamine, like scrolling endlessly on your phone, binging junk food, or chasing quick rewards. You train your brain to expect stimulation without effort. Over time, that ruins your drive. It lowers your baseline dopamine levels, which means even the things that used to excite you, your goals, your dreams, your purpose, begin to feel dull. So if you want to reclaim your focus, your motivation, your energy for life, you have to reset that system. That means practicing what I call dopamine discipline. You start by becoming aware of what's hijacking your reward system. Look at your habits. Are you getting little hits of dopamine all day without doing anything meaningful? Are you constantly jumping from one distraction to the next? That's not harmless. That's conditioning your brain to seek stimulation over achievement. And if you let that continue, you'll struggle to feel any sense of progress even when you're doing the right things. But the good news is, your brain is plastic. It can adapt. You can rewire it. And the way to do that is by gradually removing the things that create empty dopamine spikes and replacing them with effort-driven rewards. It's not about going cold turkey on everything. It's about becoming intentional. Instead of reaching for your phone first thing in the morning, reach for sunlight, movement, or a journal. Instead of zoning out on social media every time you feel bored, lean into something creative, productive, or simply quiet. Here's the key: dopamine released from effort has a very different effect than dopamine from passive consumption. When your brain learns that dopamine comes from discipline, from showing up, from putting in the work, it starts to crave that path. It begins to associate satisfaction not with escape, but with progress. And when that happens, your entire identity starts to shift. You stop being someone who chases pleasure and become someone who pursues purpose. Over the course of 90 days, this creates a profound change. At first, you'll feel the discomfort your brain will resist. It'll crave the easy fix. But if you stay consistent, if you push through those early days, your baseline dopamine will begin to stabilize. Your nervous system will become more resilient. You'll start to feel joy again in simple things: a walk, a deep breath, a completed task. That's the sign that your brain is recalibrating, and from there, your energy starts to return. Your focus sharpens. You feel more driven, not because life got easier, but because your brain is no longer being drained by constant, shallow rewards. You're no longer reacting to impulses, you're creating momentum from within. And that's a completely different way to live. Movement isn't just about fitness, it's about momentum, physical, mental, and emotional. When you move your body consistently, even just a little bit every day, you send a powerful signal to your brain that you're alive, engaged, and ready to take on the world. And the science behind it is clear. Movement creates chemical changes in the brain that boost focus, elevate mood, sharpen memory, and even reduce anxiety. But more than that, it sets the tone for your behavior. Because when you start the day in motion, you're more likely to stay in motion not just physically, but in your mindset and your decisions. You don't need an hour at the gym. You don't need to crush every workout. What matters most is consistency. Even a 15-minute walk, some stretching, or a short round of bodyweight exercises, those simple acts begin to shape your identity. You're not waiting to feel motivated. You're creating it through action. That's the key. Action changes biochemistry. Action creates momentum, and momentum builds confidence. When you train your body, you train your mind. There's a chemical called BDNF brain, derived neurotrophic factor, that gets released during physical movement. Think of it like fertilizer for your brain. It promotes the growth of new neural connections, improves cognitive function, and helps you learn faster and retain more. So it's not just about building strength in your muscles, you're building strength in your focus, your discipline, and your emotional regulation. After just a few weeks of daily movement, you'll notice something subtle but powerful. You start to feel more stable, more clear-headed, less reactive. You'll recover from stress faster, you'll sleep deeper, and because your physiology is supporting your psychology, everything starts to click. The good habits feel easier. The tough choices feel more doable. You stop negotiating with yourself about what needs to be done. You just do it because your system is aligned. This is why 90 days of movement, even the smallest kind, can completely change your life. Not because of the calories burned or the muscles gained, but because of what it teaches you about your own capacity to show up every single day, regardless of how you feel. That's where real transformation begins. If you really want to change your life in 90 days, you can't rely on memory or motivation alone. You need a system that gives you feedback. That's where tracking and reflection come in. It's not just about logging habits or writing down your goals. It's about creating a mirror you can look into every day, a way to see how far you've come, what's working, and what needs to shift. Because what you track, you improve. And what you reflect on, you transform. When you write something down, even something small like woke up at 6:30 or walked 20 minutes, you activate a different part of your brain. You're no longer passively living through your day. You're becoming an observer of your own behavior, and that shift gives you control. You start to notice patterns. You catch the little wins. You recognize when you're slipping before it becomes a spiral. That kind of awareness is power. Reflection is what makes the effort meaningful. Without it, your progress gets blurry. You forget how far you've come. You miss the tiny adjustments that could move you forward faster. But when you reflect even for just 5 minutes a night, you solidify the gains. You give your brain a chance to lock in the lesson, the feeling, the growth, and the best part, you begin to build trust with yourself. Every time you follow through on a habit and then see it in your own handwriting, it reinforces the identity you're building. It says, I don't just talk about growth, I live it. Over 90 days, that simple act of writing and reviewing becomes one of the strongest tools in your transformation. Because it doesn't just measure what you do, it shows you who you're becoming. You'll look back after a few weeks and realize that the person you are today wouldn't even recognize who you were when you started. Not because everything magically changed, but because you took the time to notice, to stay honest, to keep going. This is how you create sustainable change, not with hype, not with intensity that burns out, but with quiet, consistent reflection that keeps you aligned. When you track and reflect daily, you're no longer moving blindly, you're moving forward with clarity and purpose, and that changes everything. So here you are standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. Not because you're going to flip your life overnight, but because you're finally choosing consistency over chaos, discipline over distraction, and purpose over passivity. The next 90 days are not about being perfect, they're about proving to yourself that you can show up. One habit, one morning, one moment of discomfort, one intentional breath, walk, or decision at a time. And if you truly commit to these small actions every day, something powerful happens. You'll begin to feel momentum where there was once stagnation. You'll feel clarity where there was once noise. You'll feel strength in places you thought were permanently weak. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You don't need more time. You don't need more motivation. You just need 90 days. Give yourself that. Let it change your life forever.